have recordings of all meetings down here under recordings of class sessions. So I have last Tuesdays and last Thursdays. So if you do want to log on, I won't have them up right away. I have to send them to the college and have them look at it and everything, and then they send me a link to copy up here. So won't be on there obviously directly after class, but hopefully within the next day or two it'll be up for today's class. But anyway, if you want to look at these two assignment sheets here, they're the same thing. One's just PDF and one's DocX. When you eventually go to turn it in, to submit your assignment when it's due, you'll be able to click on that link there, and you can just hit Wednesday, September 16th. That's when it's due. And you can hit like browse my computer. You can upload a file from your computer. You technically can upload things from the cloud, meaning like your Google Drive. But the students I've had in the past who've tried that, it doesn't go through for them. At least maybe they have fixed something over the summer, but I'm specifically thinking of my students from last fall. But if you save it on your computer or on a flash drive, you would be able to upload that. And so please, for this one, do not copy and paste it into the contact box. For the commonplace book entries, I'm not worried about format. So it's easier for me to just grade when they're next to each other. If you upload a file for commonplace book entries, I have to download it and I have to do all this, and it just takes way more time. But if you do copy and paste something into for essay number 1, I'm not going to be able to comment on each little section. So I'll be commenting on a sentence or a citation, or I guess you're not studying for this paper, but in the future. So please do upload it from this browse my computer, or if it does work, I don't know, browse cloud storage, but ideally browse my computer. And so if you want to look at that while I'm talking, or in the future, you can look at that assignment sheet. But let me go to the assignment sheet so I can actually talk to you what this is about. So this is essay number 1. So we're going to have 3 major essays. And pop back over here because I think I heard a question. So yeah, so text box for commonplace book entries, but not for anything else. So only, or in-class assignments, if I have you do that, then you can do the text box. But formal essays or anything like that, you would upload it from your computer. So I could actually see the format, because the format matters more for that one. I can see your spacing and all that good stuff. So first essay, it is a narrative. And the first chapter, the chapter 4 that you read from the textbook today, was about observing. It was about observing, about being specific with description, and how to maybe show an audience maybe how are you describing events or parts of the story. And the 2 example essays that were in the book for today were both stories. We'll talk about them a little bit later in the class. But that was the reason why I had us read that chapter out of that textbook, was because hopefully it would help you understand what we're doing for this paper a little bit more. A narrative is a story about yourself. This should be nonfiction, meaning it should have happened. It's true and real. Fiction it's make-believe. So you do not want to just make something up off the top of your head. Fiction is fun. I love reading novels. I'm desperately trying to finish the last 10 pages of a book right now. I try to read before I fall asleep every night, and then I get too tired and I don't make it. So I'm desperately trying. I love fiction, but for this one, we're going to be writing a story that's actually happened, that's true. It's about yourself. It's a narrative. This is worth 100 points out of 1,000. It's worth 2 to 3 double-spaced pages. This will be more than likely the easiest paper and the shortest paper, and the paper that's worth the least amount of points. So ideally, kind of going and bouncing off the skills that we learned from this essay. I have a few different pieces of information up here. I'm going to move over to the schedule. This is the same schedule that's at the bottom of the syllabus that I shared with you last week, and that you can find on Blackboard as well. What we're going to do is we're going to have a week of in-class conferences, or one-on-one conferences. So what I will do probably next week is I will schedule about probably 10-minute conferences with everybody. Ideally wanting to kind of, if you have a finished draft, you can send it to me before. If you only have, they don't have quite a finished draft, I might be able to read it kind of fast in class. But I can kind of read it. Please don't send it to me. If you want me to read it beforehand, don't do it at midnight, because ideally I'll be asleep. But even if I'm not asleep, I'm not going to be on my computer. So So I'm going to schedule these. These classes will hypothetically, I guess, in reality, be canceled, meaning we're not going to have a formal class session like this. However, your class will be the session that I schedule with you. And so if I have you scheduled between 8 a.m. and 8:10 a.m., you don't have to come any other time but that 10 minutes. So those conferences will be specifically about your essay. They will be one-on-one with you and me, nobody else, and I'll do the work to put up Google Meet links. I'll provide them with everybody individually. So you won't use the Google Meet link that you use with the class as a whole. You'll use the individual link I send you for those days. And there's a lot of you, and there's only one of me, so I'm using the whole week to kind of do that. And the time that you're not conferencing with me, you should be working on your paper. Okay, so it's extra time, work on your paper. But this is one-on-one feedback specifically on your paper. So this means that you should have a paper having been started, and you should be working on it before you get to this point. If you haven't started on it and you have no idea what you're doing, that conference definitely will not be productive. Okay, so the most productive conferences, it doesn't have to be a finished draft by any means, have started on it. Okay, I can't really help anybody if you haven't started on it, but I can help you a lot if you have. And then this Tuesday, next week, I'll talk about peer review a little bit more. We'll do a peer review, which I will use Google Drive for. So we'll do that during the 8 to 9:15 class time. And then the final draft of it is due later that next day, Wednesday the 16th, September 16th. And so that's due by 11:59 p.m. So all formal essays will be due by 11:59 p.m., which is at the end of the day. And then that next Thursday, the next day, we will start on the next paper. And the reason I have it due on that Wednesday is just because I don't want anybody to get confused. I don't want to start another paper while all people are also working on the last one. I don't want them to have overlap and get confusing because I know that can happen. So we've got one-on-one conferences, peer review. Now, everything else we're doing these next 4 class periods will be relevant for this paper. So again, today's the class period that we do the textbook chapter. Thursday's essay is an example narrative. It's a little bit longer, so that'll be relevant for that. Complex book entry, same format. You'll want to cite it. And then that quote with the paragraph, audience paragraph, and then purpose paragraph. Think about that. And then the next week, we'll talk about drafting. How do you get started on this paper? How do you brainstorm? And then next Thursday, we'll also talk about other parts. So we'll look at a finished draft, an example from a previous student of mine. And we'll also kind of talk about paragraph formation. So this week is examples, kind of getting to, how can you do this on a professional level? And then this next week, talking about the nuts and bolts of really the pieces of writing the essay. I think I heard somebody write something in the chat. Oh, somebody needs to come in. Again, please use your Google Drive, Jeffco Google instead of your personal Google. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing over the next several weeks. So today's the 25th, and so about 3 or so weeks-ish to do this. And so going back to the assignment sheet, I have these dates up here too. So if you forget, I got the one-on-one conferences, peer review, and final draft up here at the top, which is literally the same things. Each peer review will be worth 10 points, and so so the final draft will be worth 90. If you don't come to the peer review at all, you don't get the 10 points. Okay, so the 10 points means you have a work submitted. So ideally, I'm going to talk about later. You should be sending those drafts before class, ideally hours before. I might actually set a deadline for that because it takes me a minute to put the peer review together online versus in class where you just get together and you talk about your papers. But that peer review, if you come to class, you have a paper ready to go, about 2 to 3 pages of rough draft, and then you follow. I'll have a questionnaire, kind of questions to go off of and comment on each other's papers. If you do that, there should be no reason why you don't get the 10 points. You should be reading it, hopefully, ideally more than once, and we'll talk about that later on too. But critical thinking is something we're going to be doing a lot of this semester. It's one of the top skills I'm wanting to practice. So critical thinking analysis. And a narrative goes into that because I'm going to be wanting everybody to analyze a story about themselves. And I'll talk about that in relation to the chapter we read for today. But it's often easier to analyze something that you're familiar with versus something that you're not. And so the second and third paper, a lot of those skills will be going towards text and resources that you're maybe still not familiar. So outside sources, you're not familiar with them, you may have never seen them before, and it might be a little bit more difficult to analyze those texts. So to practice those skills to begin with, analyzing something that is familiar with you, which is a story about yourself. And my hope is that you know yourself and a story that you're telling. And so I've talked about purpose and audience, and for each complex book entry, you're talking about audience and purpose, because for this paper, you should be aware of what audience you're writing to, and you should be aware of what purpose that you're wanting that audience to understand. And another way of saying purpose is kind of like main idea, but the essay must have a strong purpose. If the essay does not have a strong purpose, and I can tell that the writer is not aware of its audience, that will mean a much worse grade. Those are the two most important parts of this essay. That's not the only important part, but the most important part. And it's the biggest reason why I have those two questions on the complex book entry. It's the biggest reason why we're going to be talking about them this week. And so practicing with that. So your audience, you should have a strong awareness of audience. You should have a strong awareness of what the purpose is, and you should be writing to whatever the main idea or purpose of your paper is. I've had conferences with students before, and I asked them, what is the purpose of your essay? And I've had students write about like a vacation to Florida, and I've read so many excellent stories about vacations before, but there are also ones that don't really say anything. And this one was, I think the student said, oh, this vacation to Florida, it could be like in a travel blog. Like, okay, so you're just teaching somebody what they should be doing for a vacation, and that would just be not as strong enough of a purpose. A stronger purpose would be something to do, I don't know, with family, something you learn on that vacation, not teaching the audience that they should pack a certain way beforehand, not teaching the audience what it's like to fly on the plane, unless there was some other bigger purpose with that. But there might be something, maybe it's more emotional, a way to connect with the audience on some level. And if you don't know who that audience is that you're intending it for it to be, you're not going to be aware of it. So teaching somebody to travel might be great for another type of writing. Maybe you are running a blog, or maybe you do have a travel website. But if you're specifically trying to write a narrative and a story, that's not strong enough of a purpose for that type of writing. And so your first step is going to be figuring out what you want to write about, or brainstorming. And so brainstorming is a technique that's used. There's many different ways to brainstorm, but figuring out what you want to write about. What you want to write about and what the purpose of it is are different. Okay, so what you're writing about, the story, is going to be one decision, and then why that story matters to the audience is different. Okay, so here's my story. I'm writing about vacation to Florida. This is why it matters, and make sure that's a little bit stronger. But you can start asking yourself some simple questions. Where are you from? What schools did you attend? What is your favorite pet as a child? Your story does not have to be sad. I know a lot of people might think, oh, I don't have anything, that fits in this category. Or even if you do, you don't want to write about it. This can be happy. One of the most amazing essays I've ever read was a student who wrote about how he proposed to his now wife. And it was, I read it 3 times and I cried each time, and it was so amazing. And you don't have to make me cry. That's not a criteria of this. But it can be happy, and happy can be meaningful. You can write about something that is a little bit sadder, but always keep in mind that you're going to be peer reviewing this. You're not going to be necessarily have a whole class read it, but you will have some other people read it. So make sure that if you are writing about something, that you're comfortable with other classmates reading them. That's going to be the case for all of the essays. I have this. I shouldn't have had this on here. You guys didn't write a diagnostic essay. I thought I saved that. So ignore that. I'll delete that later. And so you can have some observation strategies. This chapter talked about observation strategies too. So think about a specific memory, a time in your life that made you feel something or you remember. That could be, I've had students write about, if they have children, a birth of a child, birth of a sibling, if they're the older child or something happened with a sibling, something happened on a sports team, many different things that students have written about. I have so many, teaching this essay for 4 years. There's so many things that people can write about, but it's going to be specific to you. Okay, nobody else is going to be able to write your story because they're not you. But once you kind of have those basic questions down, kind of complicate a little bit more. What makes you tick? What troubles or triumphs have you had in your life? What do they mean to you? How could they be important to somebody else? Way to dissect and analyze this story yourself in a way that you might not have done before. So you want to ask a lot of questions. Analysis and critical thinking has to do with asking questions. Why is this important? How will this appear to my reader? Why does this matter? So a lot of those kinds of questions. This should be a story about yourself. I said that earlier. If you have no idea what you want to write about, start basic and then work up from there. Your essay the final draft should not be just a list of basic pieces of information. I've said this before, and I think I had one paper a few years ago that was literally like a list of, my name is so-and-so, I am from this town, I went to this high school. You can do that as an initial brainstorming tactic. So just in case you don't know what to write about, but it should be used to brainstorm. It should not be your final draft. And so a lot of times if you don't know what to write about, writing a list of different things that have happened to you can be helpful. Oh, I didn't actually think about this until I wrote it down. It happens to me all the time. And brainstorming is how I think about what I want to write about. And so, again, your narrative should have a purpose, and it should be aware of an audience. Why are you writing this essay? What do you want your reader to get out of? Who is your reader? Why does the story matter to them? Should be interesting and creative. What might your reader not expect? Okay, make it unique to you. Don't want to be overly general. Okay, so again, that example about the travel site. If you should say I love art or something like that, that's going to be really basic, really general. You can start there again if you're brainstorming, but you want to kind of make it a little bit stronger, complicate it a little bit more, go beyond the obvious of what that purpose might be. And some specific kind of format issues, have clear and concise language. You should be able to, not only grammar, okay, be specific with your language. Your reader should be able to know exactly what you mean. And that's kind of the revision editing stage. Be consistent with tenses. In this paper, a lot of my students in the past have had problems with this. So if you're writing about the past, write in past tense. Okay, so I was, they were, something along those lines. You can potentially switch back and forth between the past and the present. It's a lot more difficult to do that, but you hypothetically can. You just want to make sure you're really clear about what you're doing. But if you're constantly talking about the past, don't switch back and forth between past and present. Stay in the past tense. You can have a formal introduction, but you don't necessarily need one. Some essays work with one, some essays don't. It depends on the purpose of the essay. I would advise trying not to use the word you. In some cases it works. Others it becomes a little bit off-putting to a reader. Again, thinking about your reader and how they could be interpreted this. For example, if you're asking them, you open your essay with a question like, have you ever done this? And that's a little bit harder to do because you're assuming that your audience has done something, or but what if they haven't? Have you ever experienced this? Or has your brother ever said this to you? Well, what if your reader doesn't have a brother? And then they're not going to be able to relate to that. Or what if they're an only child? And so you want to make sure you're not assuming something or asking a question like that. Again, have a clear purpose. You can use the word I. A lot of times I hear high school teachers, not all, okay, but some will say, you can't use the word I in your paper. Well, this is a story about yourself. It's very difficult to write a story about yourself without using the word I, okay? And we'll talk about it a little bit too, especially Thursday with Thursday's essay. You should be organized, have a clear paragraph structure. Don't write a 5-paragraph essay. I'm going to talk about this next week with one of the complex book entries, but every paragraph should build upon another. The easiest way to write a 5-paragraph essay is to have 3 stories in your paper. And I've had several rough drafts that are like this. You write about your English class in high school, you write about the time you run the track team, and you write the time that you went on vacation. All of those are 3 different stories. And if you come to me and you send me an essay that's like that, I'm going to tell you to pick one. And whichever one that you want to write about the most, or it's more interesting to you. So you can, that's why I say make a list before you start writing of what you might want to, and then stick with that story for the rest of the paper. Don't flip into a different story after the first paragraph or after the first 2 paragraphs. It's just 2 to 3 pages, double spaced. Again, a page and a half is not 2 pages. So I'm going to come back to here. Does anybody have any questions based on what I just talked about? Connor asked, do we email the draft to you directly or just upload it? For the conference draft and the peer review draft, you will be emailing those to me. Yeah, I don't have a place for that on Blackboard, but you will be emailing those to me. Yes. That's a good question. Any other questions that are specific to the I know it's a lot, assignment sheet I just talked about?
How long?
What was that, hon?
How long does it have to be?
2 to 3 double space pages.
So
And if you ever forget that, it's at the top of the assignment sheet.
And how many paragraphs?
I don't count paragraphs. 2 to 3 pages. So when I talked about, I'll talk about this next week a lot, but when I talked about 5-paragraph essay, a 5-paragraph essay, you probably have written these before, most likely in high school. It's kind of this list, like you'll have, I'm going to talk about apples, grapes, and oranges, and then your first paragraph is about apples, and your second paragraph is about oranges, and your third paragraph about grapes, and your last paragraph summarizes everything you talked about. You're not going to do that in this class. So we're going to actively go away from that because it's just a list of stuff. If you just tell me a list of 3 stories, that's not a story. That's just a list of 3 stories. So if you noticed in the chapter this week, the essay about the woman and her dad, and the example essay about the guy who was hunting, they're not a list of 3 different stories. They're one whole story. And so they're not just listing, I did this, and I did this, and I did this. Every paragraph built. And we'll talk about that a lot. There's literally, I have a whole class period dedicated to it next week. But 5-paragraph essay is called a 5-paragraph essay because most of the time you do have 5 paragraphs. But you can have a 10-paragraph 5-paragraph essay. You can have a 20-paragraph one. The big thing about it is you're listing. And so if you have a 10-paragraph essay, that's a list. You're just listing 8 paragraphs worth of different points, and then you have an introduction and conclusion. But you don't want to list different. You want your whole paper to be different stories. And I don't care how many paragraphs it is. What'd you say, hon?
So is it like you're saying, just when like the paragraphs build off of each other?
Exactly. The paragraphs should build off of each other. Yes.
Same story.
Yes, it should be the same story.
Oh,
So Lexia, so the rough draft, we are basically just brainstorming and writing about everything we may want to write about in the real essay. So your brainstorm is okay. So let me ask this for all of you guys. Let me back up here. When I say the word brainstorming, what does that mean to you all? What do you think of when I say brainstorming?
coming up with different ideas.
Just trying to think of like ideas of what we want to write about, of like different things in our lives that's happened in the past, just kind of things that we like, I don't know, happiness, things we've struggled with, just kind of like things in general that's happened through our lives.
Yeah, exactly. Just Connor says getting ideas together. Yeah, so brainstorming meaning that it's a pre-writing tactic. So brainstorming should happen before you start writing. And your main goal is to figure out what you do want to write about for your main paper. Okay, so if you send me brainstorming, that's fine. I can help you out, but it's not necessarily anything you have to show anybody. You can show me, you can talk about it with me, but it's not a requirement. You don't have to. Brainstorming should happen before you even write the rough draft. So I like to think about it as brainstorming. You can make a list. You can free write. We'll talk about that next week. There's tons of ways you can brainstorm. And then you can make like a graph or a chart or something. People do that too. You can outline. Lots of people do that. It just depends on what works best for everybody. And then the rough draft is to start trying to figure out, well, how am I going to write this story? So what is the introduction going to look like? What is the conclusion going to look like? And then you can start to think about sentence structure and word choice and other things that might craft it for your reader. And you can start actually, so brainstorming is a word I'm going to use a lot this semester. Another word I'm going to use is revision. What do you guys think of when I say the word revision or revising? What does that mean to you?
Like, look at the work that we've created and kind of like put our critiques on it, maybe add to detail, things like that, make it more audience capturing, I guess.
Yes, audience capturing, trying to make it more, I guess maybe more relatable for your reader. Connor, you say go back and edit it. Revision and editing are two different things. They are very important and you should be doing them both. But when I say revision, I'm looking at, I almost am saying rewrite. So this doesn't mean necessarily rewriting the whole essay, although sometimes it does, but it might mean rewriting a paragraph. So many times I've told students, delete this paragraph, it doesn't make sense in your paper. It did 2 weeks ago. But since you revised so much now, it doesn't. Maybe the purpose has changed since you've been writing it. Sometimes it means deleting a sentence and rewriting that sentence. I think I talked about last week, I have sat down, I rewrote a whole introduction 10 times, or I did it for an hour for a paper I was writing. And I would reread it out loud to myself. And that doesn't sound right. Okay, go back, rewrite it. Okay, that doesn't still sound right. And at that point, I'd be rewriting different sentences. And so I'm going to ask these questions about format kind of later on. So hold on. You can ask your questions. I'm going to ask them a little bit about format a little bit later on. But right now, I'm talking about kind of revisioning editing. Editing is more grammar based. So thinking about commas, spelling words correctly, making sure that you're grammatically correct. That's also important. Okay, that's not unimportant, but it's a difference. I have read essays that are 100% perfectly grammatically correct, but absolutely say nothing, meaning there's no purpose. I want to have a revised and edited paper, but if I had a choice, I'd rather read a paper that had a few grammatical errors, but was rich with purpose and meaning, okay? I would rather have that. I want to know why this matters to you. I want to know the meaning of it. Why does this matter to you, and what do you want your reader to know about it? So I like to think editing at the very last point, and that's why I have the peer review due the day before the essays due, because you're not only going to be looking at editing, but ideally with the one-on-one conferences the week before, we'll talk a lot about purpose and revision. Hopefully by the peer review you have revised already a lot, and then you might only have a few. It's a one last read through. Okay, what do we have to read about? Does this make sense to other readers, not just me? How does this proceed to them? Because they might not be able to understand a reference you gave. They might not understand, how, like, a sentence that you wrote. Then you can kind of adapt to those smaller issues. I had a student last year that wrote a paper about how he first started on the bowling team in his high school. And I was on the bowling team at my high school, so I knew a lot of the language that had to do with that. But when he got in his peer review group, his peers didn't understand because they knew absolutely nothing about bowling. And so I knew, but they didn't. And so if he was writing to people who had never bowled before, I wasn't a good audience for that because I haven't bowled in 10 years, but I know the lingo, and they didn't. So it was important for him to realize this is how this audience understands it, because I'm not a good audience. Because a lot of times people write something, they think, oh, of course, my reader's going to understand all of this. And then they're surprised when they don't, because they don't understand what the reader's not going to understand. That's why it's important for other people to read your essay. That's why we're going to be looking at, I'm going to have one-on-one conferences, so I'm going to be your reader, and then you're also going to have the peer review. So when you have, I had a question by Connor, so you're going to have the week of the conferences, you'll send me that draft. Then that week you'll revise some more based on what we talk about. And that essay you send me for the peer review, it definitely 100% should be a different draft. It might not be a complete rewrite, but it should have revisions, meaning you're rewriting different parts. Maybe you've edited a little bit, revised it some more, depending on the information we talk about. Every single one of you is different. every single one of you is going to write a different paper. I actively do not want, I think there's 16 people in our class, 15 people in our class. I do not want 16 different papers that all say the same thing. That would be absolutely boring. All of the papers this semester will have definitely something requirements that you're going to be wanting to look for. I'm giving you a narrative. You have the choice to write the story that you want to write, and you have the choice to pick up what that is. So I'm giving you the framework. I'm giving you the assignment. Write a story about yourself. It's 2 to 3 double-spaced pages, this, that, and the other thing. But you're choosing what that story is. You're choosing what it looks like. Okay. So every paper this semester, here's the assignment. You choose what you're doing now with that. And then I'll help you obviously along the way. And so revision and so let me for a second go to this. I have the textbook online. I have it. Actually, Jeffco sent me a copy of it, which is great. But I think I'm sharing my screen. Am I sharing my screen? No, I'm not. I always forget when I'm sharing my screen. It's okay. So this is the textbook. I think I'm on, if this scan is correct, that I'm on page like 63, 64. There's 2 parts, and there's a bunch of questions in this textbook that I think will be very helpful as you write. And the first one is this little text box here. And it says strengthening your thesis. So you can think of your thesis as your purpose, as your main idea. It's not necessarily going to look the same as an essay that you maybe like are analyzing or making an argument, formal argumentative essay. But an essay that's a narrative, if it has a purpose, it's also making an argument. That essay about the hunter, it was making an argument about hunters. Okay, it was definitely doing so, but it wasn't listing a bunch of facts about it either. He didn't quote anybody. He didn't bring in any outside sources. His evidence was all his experience. At the end, there was a point. Okay, you don't all have to make the same argument but he brought in details about his experience about hunting. And also with that essay, it was not that long. It was probably only like a day or a few hours. You can have your essay span, a whole year, several years. Want to make sure your reader is aware when you're talking about. This can be done in several ways. You could list a year. You could talk about how old you are. You could say when I started high school. Just being sure to know, when this is going on. And it doesn't have to be in chronological order. But he wrote in just a day. You can write a paper about a very jammed-packed hour or something, as long as it has a purpose. So it says, does the essay convey your main impression or idea? Does the thesis clearly state why the experience or scene you are writing about was significant and memorable? And all you have to do, I'm using purpose kind of interchangeably to mean thesis too. Does the purpose clearly, or does the essay clearly state why it was important? Does the thesis focus on a single main idea as opposed to various aspects of the experience or scene? So you could have one amazing experience and write it 10 different ways with 10 different purposes. Okay, you want to make sure that you know why this essay matters to your audience, what the purpose is, and that all of your details are being used for that purpose. And then does the thesis need to be refined in response to any new insights you're gained while reflecting, researching, and writing? As I just said a few minutes ago, your purpose might change, okay, in your essay. You might start thinking, oh, I want my reader to know this, and then you change it, you write some, and you realize it says something else. That's okay. Revise accordingly. Rewrite accordingly. And then down the bottom, I think it's on page 64, I said revising. There's also a lot of good questions you can ask too. I think these questions, ask yourself these questions while you're writing. So recollection means from memory. Observation might mean something that you're looking at right now, or that observations you're making from your memory. Where have you shown why this experience was important? Okay. If your reader doesn't know why it was important, it's not going to be important. You have to make it important for them. How have you engaged readers so they would keep reading? You also want to make it interesting. Don't just say, oh, I'm writing this because I have to. There should be a point. Okay. You should gauge your readers. You should make it interesting for them. If the events are not in chronological order, have you made your organization easy for readers to follow? So if you don't go, some people have gone, freshman year of high school, sophomore year of high school, some people have gone when I was age 7, when I was age 13, and so on and so forth. But what if you're going back and forth? Is it easy for them to understand? Is your reader going to know that you changed time? If they don't, they're going to be lost. In what ways does the ending provide a sense of finality? Your reader should read your essay at the end and go, oh, I'm done. Okay? There shouldn't be a lingering essence to keep reading something. It should be done. I'll talk about that later too. Do you stick to the point, or do you go back and forth? So you want to make sure you're clear throughout your entire essay, that your point doesn't ping pong a lot, that your paragraphs build upon each other, and then the entire essay has literally the same main idea. Okay, don't go off at a bunny trail. If you portray people, how have you made their points clear? Which details make them seem real, not just shadowy figures? Okay, so why are you adding this person in your story? Hopefully they are real people, but it's just because they were there, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to include them in your story. You can add dialogue, you can say something that they say, you can add a quote, but why are you including this person? Why is it important? And so, how do you accomplish your purpose? What can you assume readers know? Is your organization pattern the best choice for your subject? All of these questions are not necessarily questions for as you starting to think about what you should be writing. I have a lot of those questions on the assignment sheet. These are questions for as you're revising. So as you're changing different word choices, how you're changing paragraphs around, making your choices, okay? You should not just be writing one draft and sending it as your final draft. Okay? I'm going to talk about that next week. Do not do that. Do not just write it. You should, at the very minimum, be thinking about how you're revising. You should be actively changing. So in the conference we have, if I read your essay, you're going to say, oh, I don't understand what your purpose is, and you need to rewrite some stuff. If you come back the next week and send the exact same draft as your essay, that's not going to be a good grade because you haven't put in the work over that time. So taking my advice into consideration too. And so I'm going to keep this on here. Let's see. I think I answered all questions. Are we writing the draft like we write the final essay? The purpose of the draft is to get to the final draft. Okay? Your drafting is the process you get to reach the final draft. So you want to think about process, the journey you're on to get to the final draft, and the final draft being the end result of that. So if I'm, writing, I don't know, a song or something, probably the song lyrics I write for that song aren't going to be the way I put it out to the public when I'm writing the first draft. Okay, it probably isn't going to look like that. You're going to have to change lines around, maybe play some chords too, kind of doing some other things that you might want to think possible. Think about how something appears. Oh, this word doesn't make sense here. I'm going to change it around. I'm going to change that word out. The purpose of the draft is to get to the final draft. So you should be actively doing this throughout the next 3 weeks. Okay, so anything you're doing, but the draft that you send me for the conference, that should be used to get to the final draft. Okay, so wherever you got between now and the conference, that's what we talk about. Did you have a question, Cora?
I did. So, like, what are you saying, that we're just gonna keep making, like, make a draft, fix it, make a draft, fix it, just keep fixing it until we're done fixing it?
I mean, that's writing, yeah. Writing is hard work, y'all. It's not easy. If it were easy, everybody would do it. It's actually very hard, very time consuming. It's a lot of work, and the more work you put into something, ideally the better it's going to be. You don't necessarily have to send me 10 drafts. Feel free to send me a draft up to a week before the essays due. I mean, unless you have a conference on that Thursday. But if you want me to actively comment on it outside of conferences, feel free to send me a draft of anything, no matter where you are in the writing process. I'm very happy to have a Google Meets meeting with you outside of the classroom if you want to do that. So I'm very happy to do that. Just let me know and we can schedule it up. I'm very happy to. But you don't necessarily, not all authors have a formal draft. Formal draft, put it in. Formal draft, put it in. A lot of people will just kind of draft as they write, and they don't have like 10 formal drafts. That's the beauty of technology. When you had typewriters and would write by hand, you couldn't do that. We have Google Docs and Microsoft Word, and we just keep changing it. You just keep changing. I don't know how many drafts I've had if I'm revising. I could have had 10. But yeah, so you're gonna, it's a continuous process. You're just gonna keep doing that. You can send it to me as much as you want. The very minimum, you should have the in-class conference draft that you send me and the peer review draft. If you want to do more than that, feel free, but those two are the things that we do need. And then the final draft, of course. Does anybody else have any other questions about this? As I drink water. And everything we do the next 2 weeks will be about this. So if you have any drafts, you can put them in the chat and I'll come back. What I do want to talk about too, I want to come back to what we read during this chapter. A lot of people in the complex book entries that I was reading and kind of skimming gravitated towards this essay. The two personal essays. You could have found your quote anywhere in the chapter. You did want to cite the whole chapter, not just one of these two individual essays. And you did want the purpose in the audience to be about the whole chapter. But a lot of people did quote from these two essays. And so I do want to come back to them because I think it's important. So this essay was called Returning to My Father's Koreatown. If I have time, I'm going to talk about the what is a hunter. But Returning to My Father's Koreatown. This was a professional essay. The other one was a student essay. And a lot of people talked about it. For having read it, I do want to ask all of you, I'm going to stop sharing for a second here, and I'll come back. But what is what was the purpose that you all thought of when you read that essay in the chapter about Koreatown? Anybody can? Well, my question is, when you read, when you read this essay here, Return to Koreatown, what was the main purpose or the point of that essay when you were reading it?
I think that it was like the purpose of this essay was to kind of gear towards like immigrants and like families of immigrants to like be with their culture more and to not forget that past or like that part of them.
Okay, so why can't I write? Okay, so yeah, so you answered actually both questions.
Okay.
That I was going to ask here, which is great. No, that's fantastic. That's fine. Well, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to have something wrong with my computer. Hold on. Why did I do that? Okay, I'm going to start here again. Okay, so you said, if I remember correctly, so this is a chart. I'm going to talk about what I'm doing here. So you can see my screen. So you said kind of the audience would be immigrants, probably, or their families.
Yes.
And then what did you say the purpose of it was for them?
To like not forget their culture or like that kind of part of them, or like to be ashamed of being a different ethnicity in America.
Yeah. I'm trying to write everything you're saying in here.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so this essay is about first generation immigrant. So that would be somebody whose parents immigrated to America from another country, and they are the first generation of their family who was born in the United States. And so, yeah, so immigrants or their families are first generation American, like she was. And you know, I have this chart here. I'm sharing my screen with you, and I have the definition of audience and purpose up here. So this is, and there's usually in most essays more than one audience, and there's typically more than one purpose. So if you didn't think this when you're reading it, that's okay. This is, I think I definitely agree with you. She's her family, you know, immigrants herself, the daughter of one of immigrants, and so yeah, their families. Don't forget your culture. Not to be ashamed. Different ethnicity in America. Are there any other audiences or purposes that anybody thought of when they were reading? I definitely think that absolutely, for sure.
I felt that also it kind of brought her closer to just bonding with her father too. And
so do you think an audience would be maybe like adult children?
Right. Yeah, like just a relationship.
Yeah, relationships. Yeah, even if you know, you can't relate to this everybody is going to be able to relate to this in the specific way about an immigrant. You know, if you have, if you know, your father or your mother, or have some type of parental figure that you look up to, bonding with that person. Okay, because I know my dad and I, we don't always see eye to eye. We're not always like happy-go-lucky. There's a lot of things that we butt heads over, and so doing something that's just, have that bond with your parental figure, or maybe it's a grandparent or something, bonding close to them. Yeah. Any other audiences or purposes anybody thought about? For sure.
So, I think I got mine wrong, but how I saw it, I didn't even think about those two. Those were much better than mine. What did I say? Oh, I thought the purpose was to, I don't know, her explaining why writing, traveling was a way to help her feel belonged and an escape. That's what I got out of it. And for the audience, I thought it was, for this website, I thought it was for people traveling, people who felt the same about traveling. They
Okay.
liked it because it was originally posted on a website for traveling.
This is true. Yes.
So
So,
it went all over the place.
so I think that is definitely like a part of it, but I don't think it's all of it. So if she's a travel writer, who would be I guess the audience would probably be travelers, people who like traveling.
Well,
Tra-
I had a different one, but then my mom told me I was wrong. She was
So
doing
the
the
thing
same
about this is there's not necessarily one right answer. They're all wrong answers. So, for example, we're probably not going to say that the audience is circus people and that their purpose is to connect with the circus, or people who like hot air balloons or something like that, or people who like going to the zoo. We're probably not going to say the audience is those things. So there's wrong answers, but there's also a lot of right answers. There's not only one right answer. There's purposes that are probably more likely to be the purpose or stronger than others, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. So you're thinking about the platform that the article was originally published on, but we're reading.
That's what my mom told me. Because at first I was like really plain about it. I said the audience was college students because it was in a college book, and the purpose was to help put writing, no, not writing, put observing and recalling into their writing to help them understand and give them an example of how this lady right here did that in her writing. But she
Yeah.
told me that was
So,
wrong, so I changed it.
well, the thing is, you are currently reading it in the textbook. I didn't. So if you were there's both. It depends on which website you're looking at it. But if you just don't even look at the platform, I think where you're looking at it is important, because yes, it's in this chapter specifically about writing a narrative. It definitely is the specific purpose that I'm believing that the editors, the people who put the textbook together, they probably chose it in this chapter to help college students understand writing the narrative. But the author
We're getting
herself.
something from the book. That's what we should put. Like, that's how we should look at it from the college book and.
So that's an answer. So I think that was probably what the authors of the textbook were thinking. But the author, she did not think about that as a college textbook. I think maybe they reached out to her and they're like, hey, can we put this in our textbook? But initially, she didn't write it for that purpose. So we're thinking about maybe where it's at. But let's think about the essay itself, not necessarily where it's published. But I think where it's published is important. But is there any, like, for example, what information is there in the essay that might be helpful for somebody who wants to travel? Let me ask that question. Why did she write it as a travel blog or a travel article? Let me come back here, see if anybody's writing anything in the chat. I'm sorry if I don't see you. No. And anybody can answer this question. not just core. Crash and rescue. So what evidence is there, what information is in the essay that she wrote to help maybe travelers who are wanting to travel more?
I don't know, maybe to give them more confidence about their surroundings.
Okay, so yeah, so kind of looking at their surroundings. More specific, yeah, excellent answer. I think some parts of this, and this is harder, and this question kind of takes a little bit longer. Audience and purpose, you can think about the whole essay, but right now, looking at the more kind of individual pieces of information in the essay. So, for example, she starts the essay talking about, for many Koreatown's bright signage, plethora of restaurants, and popular bars make an exotic and trendy section of Los Angeles to visit. Right there in that first sentence, we have so much information. What I love about the two essays that are brought in, a lot of them have a lot of, again, descriptions. You're going to want to have a lot of description in your essay. And so, so there is a little, what information, even in that first sentence, can be helpful to maybe a traveler?
Just the brightness of it all, like it said, and then, it draws them into where, oh, I want to go there,
So yeah, talking about somebody who wants to go there, and also these last two words at the end, to visit. So it's descriptive. This is a great place. It's exotic. It's trendy. There's lots of restaurants. It's bright, popular. Come visit. But her whole essay, there is a lot of information and words in here that might say, hey, come to LA, come to Koreatown in LA. But the main point of the essay isn't only to persuade somebody to come to LA. There is a lot more to that. That's part of it. But there is a lot more to this, because if she was just doing that, it might look a lot different. She might be telling a different story that only wasn't about her first generation immigrant experience, or part of her dad's immigrant experience, or her mom. If she would just be talking about, oh, look, this bar is cool, or something like that. It might be a little bit more than that. So it is that. So again, there isn't only one right answer.
And I think sometimes people's perception of things are entirely different until you read something like this, and then you get a different perspective. Because when I hear of LA, I don't think of, Korean restaurants and stuff like that. So I think, whenever you read stuff like this, you think, oh, okay, well, maybe I will go to LA to go to a Korean restaurant or something because of reading something like this. But when I think of LA, I definitely don't think of that, a Korean restaurant.
Yeah, I think of the traffic.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so exactly. So getting a different perspective is going to help from that travel perspective. Think about a different element of LA. Just as if somebody thought of St. Louis, and they didn't know, like, there's an amazing Italian section called The Hill. There's lots of Italian restaurants, and there's actually like a really cool Korean restaurant in the Loop. I forget what it's called, or even it's still around. I went there like 5 years ago. But I had a friend who lived in Korea for 5 years, and he came back and he said this was the most authentic Korean food he's had in the United States. And that was really cool. And so there's a lot of different parts that if you've never been someplace, or even if you have and you've only seen like the mainstream stuff, like the tourist attractions, that you might not see. And so Court, you're not wrong. There is that element of it. But there are different perspectives of it too. I think everybody who said an audience of purpose is right on some level, because we also have elements. She's talking about information about the immigration experience. She said, my father dreamed of traveling the U.S. So there's multiple levels here. My father dreamed of traveling the U.S. and taking video of national parks. We do have this travel element. She even uses the word travel here. He wanted to travel the U.S. and take video of national parks. He wants to do all this. But there is also that talk about, she is bonding with her dad when she, goes to this restaurant every week with him. So there's that bonding with their father. And she also talks a lot about that cultural connection with her dad and with the Korean heritage. We get to know what this word means, you know, in Korean. They specifically go to a Korean restaurant. I think at one point in the essay, she says, you know, my dad didn't have anybody to make him authentic Korean food, so this restaurant was the closest he could get her. I'm paraphrasing it off the top of my head. I don't think that's word for word, but you know, these Korean restaurants would never make a best of list. They were not hotspots. But these restaurants, I soon realized, were also a place where bachelors could eat alone. The atmosphere was antithetical and trendy. There were no tourists here, just simple wood tables and chairs. I can't pronounce that word, but who would serve you swiftly and without frills. And so talking about the atmosphere, but also connecting it to there are not many families here. It was single Korean men. So her dad is an older single Korean man. So you know, he's going there. And so there's that connection and that loneliness of her dad being, the connection with her dad, the connection with the culture, the connection with traveling. All of these are right. There's evidence in the essay to say all this doesn't mean any of these are wrong. And so when I say who is the audience and what was the purpose, there are multiple answers in most pieces of writing. Some of them are more obvious, but there's always more. And so I do think that when I read it, I definitely was thinking of that connection with the immigration more on the forefront of my mind. I wasn't thinking of my dad, mostly because I don't go out to eat with my dad often, but I know I was reading some of the complex book entries where they, you know, some of you connected with that experience. Oh, she's connecting with my dad. They're going out to eat every week. I go out to eat every night, every week with my dad too. That's a connection. That's you're relating with the author in this way, even if your parents aren't from Korea. Even if you've never been to LA or never been to a Koreatown, that's an experience you're connecting with them on. And so there's the experience with immigration, which I also think everybody, not just people who have experienced immigration or maybe first generation immigrants, can experience. Because like you said, Jess, I never would have thought Koreatown was, you know, that part of LA. So there's like little parts of the country that are full of these experiences that unless we go into those spaces, we don't really know about or learn about. So I'm not going to be able to go into LA anytime soon. I think it's too much traffic and too busy. LA is not a destination I want to go to at the moment, especially now with the pandemic going on. However, I know that I can now probably seek out these little other parts. For a long time, I wish my area had like kind of like I don't know, independent like countries market or something. Like I see Chinese markets and stuff around St. Louis, but the closest one is very far from me, so I can't easily access it. So I want to be able to try different food, and also food. This could also be on a food blog. Talk about food some more. Like, I love food. I'll eat anybody's food just about. Was there any other audience or purpose that anybody else thought about with this essay? I'll shut up. Any other perspectives or audience or purposes that we thought about? Or any comments or thoughts you had about what we've been discussing recently? Let me look at the chat, see what we got here. Oh. Yes, our next complex book entry is due on Thursday. We won today, Thursday, and then next Tuesday and Thursday too. Yep. And so let me go back to this essay too here. With your own paper, and it's really, I think reading and writing are very much connected. So we're reading and writing. So we're reading essays, talking about them, not only looking them as some examples of writing. So one thing, looking at examples of writing, you can look at them as ways that you could learn from them. And so if you have no idea what a solid first sentence might look like, you can look to hers. If she doesn't even have similar purpose, look at the way she's using language. You know, she doesn't start her essay going, I am going to talk about Koreatown and my dad. That would be really boring and I would want to stop reading. So that's not a great first sentence. But I just read that first sentence. Again, lots of descriptions. I'm very interested. I want to know more about this. If you don't know how to start your paper, look at example introductions. Similar to this, going back to the student essay, this isn't a student of mine. This is a student that the textbook collected. I have lots of example essays too. I liked this essay overall. I personally would not advise using a dictionary definition to start your essay. When I read this, I didn't want to stop writing or reading it. I did like the essay overall. I thought it was an interesting read, very descriptive. But, you know, if this person had started this paper and had taken, let's see, this out, what I have highlighted, had deleted that and started this paper, their first sentence would have been, as a child, I had always considered the most important aspects of the hunter's person to be his ability to use a rifle, bow, or whatever weapon was appropriate to the type of hunting being done. That's a fine first sentence. I think it's great. It introduces the idea of being a hunter. He's using his own definition. For this, I wouldn't advise for this narrative, don't bring in any outside sources. We'll do that later in the semester. So your evidence should be only the information from the experiences you're talking about. But this would have been great. Okay, so specifically, for this essay about the hunter, what was the purpose and audience about that essay that you guys kind of thought about for the what is a hunter? That's the wrong one. So question for what is a hunter? What was the audience and purpose that you guys thought of when you read that essay?
I just felt like that it was geared towards like a boy that was looking up to his grandfather and being disappointed, really.
Okay. What would be the purpose of what's the main point of the essay?
I mean, he was looking forward into learning something, kind of showing off his ability to use a gun and maybe learning something from his grandfather. And at the end of the day, it was like a lost day. He was disappointed in what his grandfather had to offer. It was like the whole purpose of the day was wasted. It was like almost like him himself just was shot down, pretty much. He was like the rabbit, pretty much. That's how I got out of it.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you
saying? No. I just felt like that. I mean, he was just as dead as the rabbit, like in his heart.
So what lesson could a reader maybe learn from that?
Maybe just not get your hopes up. I just felt like his heart was crushed. So yeah, get your hopes up. And not everybody is what you may think they are. Not everyone is who you think they are, maybe. Or is who they seem to be.
Yeah, sure. Because a lot of people, especially as a child, envision somebody as something, and then if you kind of learn from them or see it firsthand, it might not match up with what you envisioned or what you dreamed.
Right.
Especially as children, or memories of when somebody was a child or something.
Right.
Are there any other audiences or purposes that anybody thought of when they were reading this essay? I think that's great. Like, that definitely is something. I never actually thought about that, but for sure. Let me go back to the chat, see if anybody wrote anything in here. No. Any other audiences or purposes anybody thought of when they read What is a Hunter? Because I know some people commented on that in their complex book entry. So I know a few people. Somebody said, Will said, there's always more to something than what you expect. Yeah, that's kind of what Jess was saying a little bit. You might expect something, and it's not always what it might seem. Yeah. Anybody else have a different audience or purpose? Because I do want to demonstrate there's definitely more than one. There's not all wrong answers. This is the part where you talk to me. So question again, and what is a hunter? Any other audiences or purposes that anybody thought of when they were reading that essay? You can unmute yourself and put it in the chat. This is the participation part. Oh, not just coming, but participating. Okay, yeah, kids who get to try something new, not knowing the outcome. Yeah, so that age, a lot about the age of the child, trying to start something new. Again, kind of like the idea, I'll put specifically, not just boy, but child. Okay, it could be that child. Not knowing, again, not just the outcome of the person itself, but the experience of not knowing what hunting is going to be. Was there anybody who thought about me saying that? Anybody thought of a hunter as maybe an audience for it? Well, it's about hunting, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the purpose or the audience. You don't have to be a hunter to figure that out, though.
Like, I feel like at one point when the grandfather was banging the rabbit's head up against the truck, it kind of gave him maybe a different outlook on how hunting is supposed to be about or what exactly it is. And because he was like, okay, I'm getting nauseous or whatever when that started happening. He was kind of questioning the whole hunting thing.
He was, yeah, I think it was the last line or something. It was the very last few lines, if I can go down to the end. Yeah, so he said, I realized that there was much more to being a hunter than knowing how to use a rifle. I turned and walked back to the pickup, riding the rest of the way home in silence. Yeah,
right.
And he's not saying hunting is bad. He's not saying nobody should hunt ever. He's
right.
saying if we're not hunting to eat and provide for ourselves or for other people, why are we wasting the lives of these rabbits? That's
right.
part of that. So I think both are really interesting. And this one's at the end. Your purpose doesn't necessarily be one sentence. You can, he develops this up into the end, and he makes this about kind of ethical hunting standards. And I think there's a difference between somebody saying you should never hunt ever to if you're gonna hunt, make it for a purpose. Don't waste this life for literally no reason. That's his point. Don't hunt for no reason. And so you can kind of make this chart for yourself. I know we're out of time. For your own essay, you can do this too. If you don't have to, it's not required, but a strategy that you can use. What your essay is about is not necessarily going to be the purpose. And so this essay was about, her and her dad, but notice that's not necessarily every purpose. So what it's about does not need to mean the lesson learned or the meaningful. So you can do this chart. Who is your audience? What's your purpose? Have a few, and we'll talk about that more for Thursday's essay. So for Thursday's essay, you should be reading American Dreams, which is on Blackboard. It should be one of the first readings up there under assigned readings, and do the same assignment as you can. So I'm going to stay on here. Class is over. I know we're out of time. I'm going to stay here in this Google Meet. So if anybody does have an extra question, just stay around and let me know. But otherwise, have a great day, and I'll see you on Thursday. Thank you, Jess. See you in like 15 minutes. Anybody else have a question or anything? I'm happy to answer them after right now. Otherwise, I'll log off. I'm going to go ahead and log off. Hey, Dolbs. Are you part of my class?